Welcome to the Doo Doo Divas Smells Like Money podcast. I'm your host, Suzan Chin Taylor, CEO and founder of Creative Raven, the firm that helps wastewater industry contractors and manufacturers unlock the power of digital marketing, AI, and PR to boost sales and opportunities. Whether it's through our online marketing and lead generation programs or providing a fully outsourced marketing department, we are passionate about helping businesses in the wastewater and civil infrastructure sectors not just survive, but thrive in today's digital world. Each episode, I'll be bringing you expert tips and strategies to help you grow and succeed. Let's dive in. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Doo Doo Divas Smells Like Money podcast. Today, we have the great pleasure of visiting with Kathlyn Kinney, who is an expert in the subject of biomethane. And so, we met on LinkedIn, started a conversation. I think she's doing something really, really cool in our space. And so I'm very excited to bring her onto the show to talk about the subject of biomethane production. And so welcome to the show, Kathlyn.
Hi, thank you, Suzanne. Good to be here.
Yeah. So for listeners, I'm sure most people are aware of it, but they may not be, they've heard the term, but they might not be completely familiar with what biomethane production really is. And so they've heard the term. And so before we get started to just kind of put things into context, it'd be great if you could just give a brief, biomethane 101 and why wastewater professionals should really be caring about this right now.
Mm-hmm. And it goes to show a little bit of how long I've been in the field.
Okay.
I called my company BioMethane while that was still the common term for renewable natural gas in the US. And since then, the term renewable natural gas has taken off in the US, whereas in other parts of the world, they still refer to it as more biogas, biomethane.
Right.
And yes, it has become much more of a topic of interest over these last 10 to 15 years. It is a source of renewable fuel that is created from organic waste, the breakdown of organic waste in an enclosed environment. And a lot of biomethane, renewable natural gas, is created from what are called anaerobic digesters. These are concrete metal tanks that might take in things like sewage. So when you're talking about wastewater plants, very relevant. Many of the larger wastewater plants have digesters on site already. They can also take in things like manure from dairy or swine. They can take in food waste. So there are a number of different organic materials.
Oh,
mm-hmm.
Oh, wonderful.
And biogas, biomethane can also be created from landfills. So those are the four main categories that you'll see. And some of those things like sewage and food waste or dairy manure and food waste can be combined. So the gas that you get out is going to be about 60% methane. And in that raw form, it's called biogas. Once you purify it and remove things like carbon dioxide and other trace gases from that stream, that's when it's called biomethane or renewable natural gas. And it's chemically identical for the most part with natural gas that you get from the pipeline from fossil sources.
Right. So, this is an area where we could tap this so that we don't have to rely on fossil fuel as much because
that's right.
That it's going to be a finite. We worry about that because it might be a finite resource. However, as long as there's people on the planet, there's going to be waste to create this.
Exactly.
So it becomes like a renewable constant supply, which is good news. And so I wanted for the audience to kind of understand what your role in this is. And one, what made you get interested in this? I wouldn't think that, biogas, everybody's probably thinking a stinky thing. For a lovely young woman as yourself, why would you want to get involved in this? And then what is your role? Like, what are you doing in the scheme of things as it relates to this little segment of our industry?
Well, we both know that things that smell like poo are the coolest. And there's not a cooler industry you could get into.
No, because it smells like money.
Got into this. Yeah. I got into this when I was an undergraduate in college,
Okay.
because, like I tell people, I was a troublemaker. And
Oh,
when other people were busy in their classes, I was trying to figure out, what's going on with the steam plant heating the campus, what's going on at the local wastewater plant. I would get myself tours of these places just for fun. That tells you
okay.
what kind of a nerd I am.
It's okay. I
And
know
somewhere along the way, I heard about this process of digestion, and I thought, why are we not heating campus buildings with food waste? Renewable resource, need for energy. Why not? It turns out that the university I was going to, Western Washington University, had a program out of the Vehicle Research Institute there, which is a very unique program. Students would build and race cars on alternative fuels.
Oh, wow.
And I got somehow into that program, even though I know nothing about cars. And that's when I had my eyes opened to the fact that you can actually use renewable natural gas as a vehicle fuel. So at that time, I thought this is the coolest thing ever. Not only is biomethane in many cases carbon neutral, it can even be carbon negative. And we might get more into the math behind that later.
Right.
But for me, it was this idea that you could have truck transport, fleet vehicles running on fuel, that by virtue of using that fuel, we're actually cleaning up the environment. And I thought, what better way to go about saving the world than creating something that people use all the time, that is behind all of our really society, and running the country, running countries around the world, and do it in a way that is actively cleaning the environment. So that's where it started. And then beyond that, um, at least with some of the incentives that were in place then, and some of them have come into play since, some of them are no longer, but as it was, that fuel would be less expensive than the diesel that trucking fleets were currently running on. So to me, it was that really triple win. You're paying less for this fuel, and you're able to do exactly what you would need to do with a fossil source effectively. And then you're also cleaning up the environment.
Well, one of the things that we talked about offline was that, you're not selling equipment, and you're doing something very interesting because this isn't something, if a plant is hearing this, it's like, well, yeah, we could use that. We could tap that. Yeah, let's go out and do it right now. And it's like, okay, well, you really need to understand what you're doing so that you're getting the right equipment, the right configuration, the right solution, and also to understand that it may sound like a good idea for you, but maybe you're not an ideal candidate and you could spend a lot of money chasing this only to find out that it isn't going to deliver the results that you were hoping for based on all the good things that you heard about it. And so thereby enter Kathlyn. So from what I'm understanding, and I want you to get into this a little bit, is that if an entity is interested in pursuing this, whether they be a municipality or a CAFO, industry, we're talking about food waste, farm and agriculture, all of that. What their first step should be is feasibility, a study. And this is where
And yeah, you touched earlier on this being really a replacement for fossil fuels in an area that can be hard to decarbonize, the natural gas. And so I got into business because a lot of people said, well, there's never going to be enough renewable natural gas to replace fossil sources, which to an extent is true. We do need to cut back, but it's going to be a vast uphill, if not impossible, to electrify everything. That's
right.
where having a diversity of pathways to get energy to end uses is really, really helpful. So I got into business figuring out, well, how can we make as much renewable natural gas from the waste available as possible? And that's where, when I moved out to Spokane, Washington, where I'm currently based, and we didn't have necessarily factory farms in the immediate vicinity, and we actually don't have any landfills because we have an underground aquifer that was getting polluted. So we moved away from landfills, but we do have wastewater plants here. And to me, that's a source that's not going away. If anything, it will get more. And there's no way of saying, oh, we should do away with wastewater plants or the people that are producing the waste going to them. And so that really began my quest to figure out, okay, well, where is the gap? We have the resource, we have sewage. As I mentioned, a lot of the mid-scale and larger plants already have digesters in place that are producing raw biogas. And many of them are using it for some perhaps process heat, simply to heat the digesters themselves. But a lot of them are also flaring vast quantities of gas. For example, in Spokane, the city's main wastewater plant is flaring enough gas to fuel their entire waste hauling fleet over the course of the year. So I came into this looking at, okay, what are some of the logistical barriers, cost barriers, technology barriers, and a lot of plants, their mission is cleaning the water.
Right.
They also have a responsibility to make sure that the biosolids are processed to be compliant and be able to be put back onto agricultural lands or otherwise disposed of. So those are the two main missions of a wastewater plant. Very rarely do they have dedicated staff that can look into how do we really best produce and use this biogas. And what I was finding is that many plants might be thinking about it. They might have even explored a couple of options. But when you are not able to focus on what are all of the pathways that you could take, how are you going to maximize that resource, and what's going to be the most cost effective of those pathways, then you end up getting a very sporadic approach. You may be able to talk to a couple of equipment suppliers, but when you're only looking at one or maybe two at a time, those conversations could fizzle out after a few years. So a lot of these projects just weren't getting off the ground. And that's where I'd come in, and knowing what all the different players are out there and ways that you could perhaps get more gas out of the resource that you have, that's when we're able to produce these feasibility studies that tell plants, yes, here are the optimal ways that you can do this. Here's what that's going to look like. And here's the pathway that you would take to get there.
Excellent. So it's like when a plant calls you, what have you found? What problem are they usually trying to solve if they want help with this? Is it like you were saying, obviously it's probably not related to compliance, but they're probably looking at maybe energy resilience or maybe their own sustainability initiatives. But of course, cost containment, energy costs are, one of the biggest expenses at a wastewater treatment plant is just powering
Absolutely.
the processes. So what does when they're coming to you with these problems, how do you start that process? And I guess maybe speak to us a bit about what does the feasibility study include that helps them make that decision or the best next step based on the problems and what their goals are.
And I think you've touched on something really key, which is when a plant does reach out, looking at improving their biogas production and monetizing it isn't necessarily top of mind.
Right.
They are usually wrestling with budget shortfalls, they're wrestling with aging infrastructure, things like how are we going to handle biosolids down the road? There might be more regulations coming into play. They may have just put in a next level of treatment system, which is going to double the energy usage of the plant and other costs. So what we see is that these plants are in many cases in panic mode over a lot of those more pressing issues.
Right.
Biogas seems like a nice to have, but what they may not be seeing is the connection between utilizing that resource and solving some of these down the road issues. So what we focus on is how can we take what's currently getting flared and directly be able to then offset some things. For example, there are different technologies that can increase the biogas output of a plant quite a lot. And it will do that by also reducing the quantity of biosolids that are leaving the plant. Most plants would love to have fewer biosolids coming out of their system. That reduces the trucking miles, it reduces some of that need for compliance because you might also be taking out some of the pollutants as you're going. And then even more pressing with things like PFAS, once you are able to, say, increase the temperature of your sludge in order to increase your biogas production, you'd be able to go from, say, a class B biosolids to a class A biosolids. So now you have more flexibility over what you can do with that. So there are a lot of things that are not apparent on the surface. how does increasing your biogas production help your plant? But there are a lot of links like that.
Yeah, because PFAS is one of those things that's kind of the hot topic right now of, all
Mhm.
right, it's coming down the pike. We know there's some legislation out, but it's only going to get more stringent. They're going to be looking for solutions, and how are we going to stay ahead of the curve? And from what you just mentioned, isn't it interesting how technologies are there that on the surface it looks like, yeah, it does this. It was designed to do this. And it's kind of like, oh, but by the way, do you know that it also, the byproduct of that, it is also does this? And when you
Yes.
mention
And
that,
it sometimes
really why
takes
I wanted to
less
bring you on
gas.
the show, because I think a lot of people aren't, they hear, oh, yeah, it produces energy that I can use. But these little added hidden benefits that people are probably not aware of, that, wow, if that is an issue that's on your mind, it's maybe you can kill multiple problems off with one fell swoop.
Mm-hmm. And so, for example, what we're looking at in Spokane and currently doing feasibility is first getting that gas production up, consequently, also having a reduced quantity of biosolids coming out of that plant, and then looking at doing a regional organics processing facility where we'd also bring in things like food waste. We might be able to bring in woody waste. And at that quantity, now we can do things like sludge drying. We can do additional anaerobic digestion, get more energy out of that organic stream, and then look at putting in a pyrolysis system, which would actually break down those PFAS components.
That's fascinating. So I want to talk about that a little bit as in conjunction with it. You just a pyrolysis system. Now, is that
Mm-hmm.
something that you can have separately, or is it recommended in your experience to really get the biggest bang for the buck to have it tied in with what we're talking about here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, terms pyrolysis. I realize I sometimes throw those in without the explanation.
Right.
Pyrolysis is a very high temperature, low oxygen process. What you
Okay.
get out is biochar and additional energy in the form of syngas. So a product that can actually be used to filter water, similar to what you might find in like a Brita water pitcher, as well as more usable energy. And in that process, the PFAS is eliminated at over temperatures of 900 degrees Celsius, I believe it is. Some of these processes go up to 2000 degrees. So you're talking about definite elimination of that. And in sequence with anaerobic digestion, there's been studies done that show anaerobic digestion itself can reduce PFAS, although it may also lead to some of the shorter chain PFAS being reduced. So you have to be careful. But then when you combine that with pyrolysis as a next step, now you get, I believe, close to 99% reduction. So these are the kinds of things that may not be immediate to a wastewater plant's awareness, but are some real solutions out there.
Wow. And I know that the char that you were talking about, I've spoken to some other folks about this, that as an energy source or a product that can be used in various processes, it's very expensive and it could be a huge revenue stream. That if you don't use it
Mm-hmm.
all yourself, here now you've got a byproduct that you can sell on the open market. And there are people that are
Correct.
actually looking to buy this for different types of manufacturing processes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I
So,
did work with a firm that was producing biochar from gasification, a similar process. And once you get to a certain quality of biochar, not only is there higher value markets for it, you're also getting carbon credits. So that's yet another revenue stream. Um, you can use it for actually filtering PFAS out of contaminated water.
wow.
A very circular use of that biochar. It has water retention properties. So if a municipality is in an area that is struggling with increasing wildfires, there would be ways if you were to spread that in concentrated trenches in forest lands, you could create fire breaks because of the water retention properties.
Oh, that would be critical for the West. California suffers, every
Very
year.
much.
Arizona, where I'm at,
Mm-hmm.
it suffers every year. And, you think about how they have to do sometimes these controlled burns, to create those fire lines. And you often wonder, well, okay, we understand that it's solving a problem. But for those of us who are living next to those forests, when they start to do that, the smoke in the air actually begins to affect our health. So if you have, sensitive
Mm-hmm.
breathing issues, that's not really good for you. So you've just brought up something, wow, other things that we can do to protect the planet and yet still protect ourselves and the problems
Mhm.
that we may have that, I think we have to start looking out. I hate that term, look outside the box, but, look beyond what we've always done. Is that
It's
just
really true.
the
Yeah.
way that we've always done it? Is that the way we should always continue to do it if something else like this presents itself on the forefront? I don't want to get
Mhm.
political. I might get
And
some pushback on this episode.
that's the challenge.
But that's the challenge. But we only have one planet, and we have to take care of it. And if there are things that are presenting themselves to us that will allow us to take something that, gosh, we need to get rid of anyway, we need to dispose of it. Well, rather than dispose of it, why don't we turn it into something that we can use for good? To
Mhm.
me, it's a no-brainer, and I'm sure it's a no-brainer to you. So, if you could give one piece of advice to anybody that's a plant leader, municipality, public works, anybody that's really looking at this subject or it's been, on their radar as something to explore, what would it be?
Mhm. I mean, beyond, of course, giving us a call,
Right. Well,
obvious
yes,
first answer.
that's a no-brainer.
But as far as looking at how do you get from point A to point B, how do you get from where you are to having a successful project? It is going to look very daunting at first because we are looking outside of the box. You may need to link together multiple pieces to get that project to really succeed, and that's what we do. Looking across silos at where are these opportunities, what's and I like to say we don't show if it's going to work, it's how.
Right.
um, but to look at it in a phased approach. And that's something we help with is okay, maybe you're not ready to make a $10 million investment that includes biogas upgrading equipment, but you might be at a place where you can put in a pilot that increases your biogas production.
Mm,
And from there, start to see some results, start to see some improved savings and revenues. And so, really taking it in those small chunks and
right.
then being able to see where these things are actually happening at other plants. I know that's always something that um, wastewater managers want to see. Where else is this happening? So we know where a lot of those facilities are,
Mhm.
and then being able to roll from there with the successes that you see. And it's always going to look different on the ground than in the ideal case. And that is where we really love being able to link plants up to ones that have tried these things and have the lessons learned. And every plant's going to be a bit different, but that helps give a view into how these can really work.
Right. Because, you just mentioned cost, because everybody's going to think, oh, yeah, this sounds like it's great. Yeah, I could probably afford a feasibility stuff. But then, putting it together and making it happen budget wise is that you touched on something of ways to work around it for either grants or a pilot and let it get off the ground in phases that maybe what you're getting back in either savings or revenue generation of energy that you could sell can be used to offset to pay for the project. So the project pays
Mhm.
for itself over time is something that I think, working with a consultant over yourself, like yourself, of showing that it isn't impossible. There are ways to make it happen. We just have to be really creative and very methodical in the way that we approach it if you're really
Mhm.
serious about wanting this. And
Yeah. And I would
so,
say don't do a feasibility study unless you are serious about implementing the steps that come out of it.
yeah,
It's an investment that pays off because of the work that's done after. And I would say that can be the number one pitfall is plants that may not have that political will or that staff will yet to do a project. Um, it's going to succeed far better when you have that in place.
if you have buy-in of the entities that say, yes, we seriously want to do this and we need to see how we can make it happen. If they're in that position, they are the
Exactly.
ones that are going to benefit most from the things that you offer as far as feasibility. So,
Absolutely.
you know, um, what do you think? And this will be our last question: is that what do you think operators and managers should be looking at? Watching over the next couple of years as it relates to renewable energy, gas and energy recovery. Where do you see, or what do you see on the horizon as innovation that's coming that's going to make adopting this or getting this, having this more feasible
Mhm.
and easier to
There
act.
are certainly innovations all the time, whether that's improving biogas production, more innovative ways of actually digesting that waste, um, things apart from a lot of inflation and um, supply chain challenges. There are a lot of technologies that are becoming lower cost and more effective and efficient as we go forward. But because those things can be hard to track, and we recognize that, that's why we keep these running databases of technologies that are emerging. But there's also the opposite side of that, which is um, some of the incentives that might be in place now won't always necessarily be there. So again, that's why we want to talk with plants that are ready to move forward, because some of those things may become more costly down the road. And honestly, acting now, even if maybe it seems like, okay, maybe there's going to be more technology later, is often to a plant's advantage, so that they can avoid some potential cost increases down the road.
Right. So, Kathlyn, thank you for, sharing your insight and your wisdom and what all this is about and how people can take advantage of it. And so, if for those who are listening that may be interested in exploring the possibilities with you about this process, what's the best way to get in touch with you and learn more?
I am on LinkedIn, and I assume my name will be listed in the link for
Absolutely, in the
this
show notes.
podcast. So I'm reachable on LinkedIn as well as at my website, biomethanellc.com. So bio methane, methane, and then llc.com. And my number that you can reach me at is there, as well as a link to send me.
All right. Well, thank you. And I have found this absolutely fascinating. You've opened up my eyes to things and benefits about this that I didn't even know existed. And I hope, audience, you picked up a couple tips today on this very important and timely trending subject. And so thank you for spending time with us, both you, Kathlyn, and you, listener. And until next time, keep it flowing. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. If you're ready to take your marketing to the next level and start increasing sales and opportunities for your business, reach out to us at Creative Raven. We're here to help you thrive in the digital landscape. Visit creativeraven.com or click the link in the show notes below to schedule a call and learn how we can support your growth. If you enjoyed the insights on today's episode, be sure to hit subscribe so you'll never miss an update. Until next time, keep growing and keep it flowing.